Coming up, we have stories about free childcare, ? Abusive parents, physically destructive stepsister, mentally destructive biosister, inheritance and how it destroys relationships, being second place to a late wife, and a happy story as the cherry on top. Am I the astronaut for asking to get paid after 3 years of free childcare? Originally posted a year ago on my account, but reposted in hopes Mr. Thunder himself might make a video I can direct people to when they ask why my in-laws are actively trying to get people to hate me. Here it is! This is it! Mission accomplished. So if you have been directed to this video directly by OP, welcome. Hopefully this sheds some light on the situation, of which I know nothing about yet, but we're about to find out. I am a stay-at-home homeschooling mom to my own 4 kids. My husband works third shift, and after he goes to work and the kids are in bed, I work on my side hustle, an Etsy shop, to help contribute financially to the household. My sister-in-law and her husband, who work second and third shift, started their family. I was so excited for them. They asked me to watch my nephew for the hours their shifts overlapped, since I was awake anyway. I said yes, even though I was pregnant with number 5 at the time. He would be the 4th kid in the house, as we had recently lost our daughter. So sorry to hear that. I told my husband they asked but never offered to pay, but if they offered, I would gladly accept. 3 years go by and they added my niece to their family. My Etsy shop is basically neglected for this entire time, as I have to wait until I get both kids to sleep before I can work on anything. I had them from 8 p.m. to anywhere from 11 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. I try to stay up to work on my digital items, but I still have to wake up at 8 a.m. to start my day with the kids. My sister-in-law says something about her husband's work helping pay for childcare of a coworker for her mother watching their kid. I asked if that would be something she could look into for me. She said yes, and then I never heard anything for months, even though I saw her basically every day of the week. I finally worked up the courage to ask. My husband insisted. He took a few days off work and stayed home to help me. He saw exactly how much work watching them was. He was aghast. "You've been doing this free for 3 years?" He insisted I ask about being paid. He's her direct boss at work, so I didn't feel right about him asking her. A month later, I got enough courage to ask. My sister-in-law is a very explosive personality. You have to walk on eggshells and catch her in the right mood to ask anything. I asked and she said what her friend was doing was sketchy, but asked me what I thought was fair. I told her I didn't know, but I would like to help contribute financially so the burden wouldn't fall solely upon my husband. I looked into a local nighttime daycare/babysitting, and the rates in my area are $20 per hour per kid, and that was the cheapest I could find. I thought that was ridiculously high. Even though I know that they could afford it, they are very open about how much money they make and the bills they pay. I knew I couldn't ask for that. I asked her what she thought about $10 an hour for both kids. She freaked out. She said she was thinking of offering me $8 and that everyone she asked said that was far too generous and that she thought I would work with her. I said I was, but that my offer was $5 less than minimum wage in our area. I heard nothing from her for a week. She was on vacation, so I thought we would talk when she came back. The day before I was set to watch the kids again, I get a text that my services would no longer be required. I was hurt that after 3 years of helping them, I was dropped like a lead balloon. I know I should have spoken up sooner or said something before agreeing, but number 1, I was so excited to spend time with my newest nephew, and number 2, it never occurred to me that they wouldn't offer to pay ever. So much has happened since then, which I can elaborate on later if you want, but this was the catalyst. I need some true outside perspective with zero emotions involved. Help. Well, luckily, I can do the zero emotions thing. I've got a robot switch somewhere where I can just boop. So let's look at this whole situation here and evaluate. The question is, am I the astronaut for asking to get paid after 3 years of free childcare? No, let's get that out of the way right now, right? NTA. NTA. Let's go ahead and dive in to some reasoning and some logical paths here. Candy Thunder comments and says $5 an hour, laughing emoji face. NTA, 100% NTA. They knew they were taking advantage of you. That's the bottom line. They knew they were taking advantage of you the whole time. They had the mission of writing this out for eternity if you were game for that. So until you spoke up, they were going to play dumb. That was the mission. And even after you said something about getting paid and were led on, and yes, let's call it what it is, they led you on about the possibility of getting paid. You were led on because they needed time. They were just milking a little more time out of this arrangement, which only benefited them. Let's call that what it is too. Yes, spending time with the kids is great when it is of your own volition. When someone is relying on you to do this on a schedule, especially one that extends into the wee hours of the night, sometimes into the 1 a.m. hours, it's work. It ceases to be quality time and it becomes work, right? And yeah, you can ask family to do something like that for you, but if you're relying on them that heavily, at some point, you're going to have to be willing to pay up. Because what's the alternative? What is the alternative? And maybe this is what they were aware of the whole time. The alternative is that they end up having to pay someone else more. Someone that either they don't know, or they're not as comfortable with, or their kids aren't as comfortable with. And this is where it gets shitty for them. Rather than pay something to someone that the kids are established and comfortable with, they chose a completely different route. Now, we don't know what that is yet, right? We don't know. Hopefully, OP, go ahead and write us an update with some details here, like elaborate for us. But we don't know if they chose to pay someone else or if they found someone else that they could sucker into doing it for free and they're going to ride that until it dries up as well. That was a weird way to say that, but you know what I mean. They found someone else to take advantage of. You finally spoke up. They will do the same, but maybe they'll get 3 years out of it like they did with you. Yes, you should have spoken up sooner. Yes, this should have been a conversation that happened in the very beginning before you ever started doing it, but hindsight's 20/20, right? That doesn't mean that you don't have the right to speak up later on because it's been this way for a while. Pain creates change. There was enough pain in your situation to create a need for change. You speaking up was the pain that created a need for change for them. Only they chose, I'm guessing they found somebody else they could dupe into doing it for free. Because if they were going to pay somebody to do it, they would have figured out that what you were offering, the rate that you were offering, was less than it would have cost for anybody else. This would have been the cheapest option for them by far, unless they found someone else to do it for free. That's the only explanation that makes sense here. So no, you're not the asshole here. They're the assholes. They took advantage of you. They knew they were taking advantage of you. And rather than be fair and pay you a fair wage for the work that you're doing, because it is work, I'm guessing they found somebody else to take advantage of. And that sucks, especially when they have the means to pay you a fair wage for what you've done. It's not just moving forward either. That wage they would be paying you would be doing something to compensate you for the 3 years worth of work you've already done. And they're like, nah, we don't respect you enough to do this. Okay. If you don't respect your relationship with me enough to do that, you don't have a relationship with me. And I hope that's where it is now. So I'd like some more information on that and an update if you write one, OP. I would love to know where your relationship is with them now. I hope it's no contact. Creating a boundary for yourself because you have enough self-worth to know when you're being taken advantage of. If somebody's not willing to respect that, they don't respect you and they don't deserve to have a relationship with you. 0 is greater than -1. Am I the astronaut for telling my daughter she is a spoiled brat and doesn't know what a hard life is? Trigger warning, abuse. Shite. All right, here we go. Okay, so background, I am 40 male married to a 38 female. We met in high school. Wife's parents are terrible. Completely abused her until she moved out at 18. My wife has always tried to be a good mother and break the abusive cycle. We both have good jobs. They want for nothing. We tried not to spoil them. They have chores, know their manners, they're good kids in school. So my daughter came home one day and asked us to go visit her grandparents' house. We said yeah because we thought she meant my parents, but no, she meant my wife's. My wife immediately said no. Then I backed her and said they will have no part in their lives. She said I was overreacting and that she deserves to meet all of her grandparents, and we were being selfish. My wife was diagnosed with PTSD, and she still sees a therapist due to all the bullshit that she went through. It really annoyed me, and I sent my daughter to her room. I talked to my wife and said that I should tell her what happened, so she understands why we're saying no, that her parents aren't good people. My wife was reluctant but agreed as long as she didn't have to be there so she wasn't triggered. I went to my daughter's room the next day and I talked to her. I said, look, I understand you're upset, but we are not saying no just to say no. There's a lot that you do not understand, but I'm going to explain it so that maybe you understand more. Your mom's parents were abusive. She was humiliated daily, screamed at, and terrorized since she was 6 years old. Every moment and holiday was ruined by fear, and she almost died on Thanksgiving Day due to her stepfather. That your mom and her sister still suffer from the trauma, and that we will never have a relationship with them, and I hope that she understands now. Something along the lines of that. I told her and thought she understood. Anyway, it was my wife's birthday a week ago. She doesn't like celebrating, honestly, but does it for us. It was actually a really great day. My wife's sister and our 2 children and my whole family were there celebrating at our house. Until around 7 at night, a knock at my door and my daughter went to answer the door. We figured it was a friend of hers. When she came right back into the living room, it was my shitty mother-in-law and father-in-law. Oh no! Like, oh no, Scoops, like what are we gonna do? Like, don't give them any sandwiches. My wife and her sister both frozen, and they came in like they owned the place, trying to be buddy-buddy. My wife asked them in a timid voice and said, "What are you doing here?" And they said, "Our granddaughter invited us." She then tried to speak up more and tell them that they needed to go, but they wouldn't. I got up and went between my wife and them and said to them, "Leave. You are unwanted here." My daughter really stood up for them and said that she talked to them and that mom is just exaggerating what happened. You little... And that they were good parents. That's when my father-in-law said, "That's right, whatever we did to you ungrateful kids, you deserved." Gonna run out of red flags tonight, ladies and gentlemen. That pissed my wife off and she shouted to leave. I went up with my dad and we were going to push him out, but he's 6'4", 250 pounds, at least got us off him. And he pushed my wife into the wall. Her head hit straight back at the wall, so she had to go get stitches. As soon as that happened, me and my dad and brother forced him outside and said they needed to leave or we would press charges. Her mom kept saying that she was a good mom and that my wife was dramatic and she just had bad children. Anyway, my mother took my wife to the hospital because we were still trying to get them to leave the driveway. My mother brought her there and back once they left completely. My wife didn't say anything the rest of the night, besides thanking my mother for the ride, then going to our room. Her sister was really freaked out too and left right after hugging my wife. My children were in the living room and I told my son and my younger daughter to go into their rooms. I needed to speak to their sister. I admit I lost it. I screamed. I said she was so selfish and I couldn't believe she did that. That she still got into contact after I explained what they did to her mom when she was younger, how I was honestly disgusted with her. She started to cry and say she genuinely thought I was exaggerating and it would be good for them to get together. She said she got in touch with them on social media and they seemed great, how they made everything seem not as bad, and she said she didn't think that they could be that evil and be related to us. I told her there are evil people everywhere. We have just tried to shield her away because parents are supposed to protect their kids. I was so upset. I genuinely wanted to call her an idiot, but I didn't. But every move my wife did to move past her trauma was demolished by this idiotic decision. My daughter apologized and I said, sorry doesn't cut it. Her actions risked her mother's health and everyone's safety. My wife talked to her and said that she no longer trusts her and how those are the consequences of her action. For meddling in something that was not her business to meddle with. She has no more phone and no more visiting friends until she earns that trust again, and we could add a punishment if we see fit. I've comforted my wife as much as I can, but she's not great. While I honestly think I went too easy on my daughter, I figure I should have another opinion. Am I the astronaut? There's an edit and an update, so we'll get into it. Edit. To clear the timeline, my daughter sought them out after I told her what happened during her mom's childhood. I asked, and she said she reached out first as well. My daughter is 16 years old. I think it probably started sooner than that, earlier than that. Update, more information. We did make a report, and we are pressing charges. and we'll be doing everything we can to get a restraining order. We didn't call the police because we live in a secluded area and it would take too long for them to get here. We deleted all of my daughter's social media, and I did look at her texts between her and her in-laws. She reached out first and kept pursuing them. There were 3 messages before that my in-laws ignored until they eventually responded. Also, that was not the first conversation we had with her about my wife's parents. It was just the first in detail conversation. I told her specific scenarios and events that happened without getting too graphic, but she and my other children always knew that their grandparents were bad. We had multiple talks growing up when we first started to explain why they only had one set of grandparents, unlike most of their friends, but we never said anything in specific details about the actual events, only that their grandparents were bad people who hurt their mother and aunt a lot. She told me she's doing her best and feels bad for her distancing herself from her daughter, but she's just extremely hurt. My wife's going into more therapy sessions than she normally does, and we have set an appointment for my daughter to see one as well, and we will try family therapy to get back to normal. Anyway, I did not think this would get so many views. Thank you all for the advice. Holy shite. Hubby, Dad here. You did well. You did well. All things considered, with this extremely volatile situation, you did the right thing. Now, the specific question you're asking here is, am I the astronaut for telling my daughter that she's a spoiled brat and doesn't know what a hard life is? I didn't hear you say that. Are you wanting to say that? I don't think you need to say anything more than what you've already said. The fact that you're getting her into therapy and then you plan on doing family therapy to further expand on this is the right thing to do. I don't think you need to beat this into the ground to make your point. I think therapy will help make that point. Her mom distancing herself from her will make that point. That will be a lot of pain that will create change. For a 16-year-old girl, for her mom to distance herself from her because of something she did that caused her mom emotional trauma and damage and pain, that's going to be pain. Hopefully enough to change what happened. What I'm curious about that we don't know is what triggered this. What triggered the need, that first request to go over to her grandparents, and she meant her mom's parents. What caused that? Something happened. And that's why I thought grandparents reached out first and it had happened earlier. Something happened for her to be like, you know what? I've heard that they're bad people my entire life, but I really, really want to meet them. I really want to get to know them. What happened that caused that? Maybe a friend went through a similar situation. Maybe a friend said something. Like, it's really messed up that you don't know them. Have you ever thought about reaching out? Maybe you should reach out. I think you should meet them. Something happened. She saw something. She heard something that made her think, I want to zero in on this topic. And even though I know there's bad shit there, I'm obsessed with this right now. And she got to this obsession point where she ignored all of the warnings, which were in depth, and decided to go ahead and go through it anyway, and then said that she thought her dad was exaggerating. No, not okay. You're 16 years old. I'm not saying that you should know a lot about emotional trauma or you should know about abusive homes or anything. Thank goodness you don't. Thank goodness you don't. But when you are explicitly told no, because they did this really up shit to your mom, they are evil people, and then you still went ahead and did it anyway and brought them over? Kid, I know you're only 16 years old, but damn, you just did a really evil thing to your mom. This was malicious. I know in your 16-year-old grandparent trap Disney ending mind, this was probably like, I'm going to fix this for them. I'm going to be the hero of the family. They're going to show up and everybody's going to get along and then we're going to have one big happy family and then I'll get more presents for Christmas and everything is going to be great. World doesn't work like that, unfortunately. Thank goodness. At 16 years old, this is the first time she's facing it. I want to say she's not going to make this mistake again. The fact that she was explicitly told in detail what happened and why, and thought her dad was just exaggerating and then went ahead and did it anyway, puts a ding in that confidence, obviously. And yes, she's got to earn this trust back because she did it knowingly. So make her earn it back. And go through therapy to help, because this is a deep issue that you can't handle yourself. This one comes from the AITAH subreddit again, and is titled, Am I the astronaut for telling my husband that my stepdaughter can't return home until she pays my daughter back? Oh no. Trouble in blended family paradise. I, 30 female, have a 14-year-old daughter, Leah. I married my husband, Mark, 46 male, 6 years ago. He has 2 children from a previous marriage, Coy, 16 male, and Coral, 14 female. Me and Mark have the kids full-time, but his kids live with their mom for a few weeks during the summer. They moved into my lake house, which has 5 bedrooms. 2 of the bedrooms upstairs have bathrooms. My daughter had one of those rooms. But as the girls began high school, Coral began complaining about not having a bathroom and said it's unfair. Mark and Coy told her to stop complaining. By the way, it's Coral, C-O-R-A-L. It's not me pronouncing Carl like Rick Grimes. Coral. Leah said it was fine and asked us if she could turn the basement into her room. I didn't like that idea, but she begged, so I agreed. Turns out my daughter wanted a room makeover, so it all worked out. We gave the kids an allowance and allowed them to get a work permit. Damn. Coy worked at an arcade and told the girls he could get them jobs. Coral refused to work, but Leah agreed. After 5 months of saving her allowance, she was able to buy everything she needed to decorate. Coral never bothered to go down there because she believed it was full of spiders, but Coy was down there every day helping her. After a week, she completely transformed the basement. She invited everyone down, and it was stunning. I didn't even know that computer towers could be clear. She looked so proud. Coral then screamed that it wasn't fair and that she wanted the basement now. Everyone began yelling at her, but she began crying, and before we knew it, she ran over to the computer and threw the tower on the ground. The glass shattered, and one of the monitors fell to the floor, also breaking. I'm going to go ahead and do this. You're not making it into the DFHB club. Oh. Not a fan of this behavior. My daughter cried. I explained to Mark that Coral has to pay for this. He said her emotions are just high and that we'll get situated when everything calms down. I ran to Coral and yelled saying that she's on punishment. Mark didn't agree, but I didn't care. Coral was unnecessarily crying and ran to her mother's car. Coy was trying to help my daughter and Mark tried to hand her $300, but Coy explained that Coral caused about $1,000 worth of damages. He said luckily the expensive pieces in the case were saved, but the case itself was around $450 and the monitor was $200. Probably backward, but that's okay. Mark explained that he doesn't have that kind of money, so I said she can't come back until my daughter's stuff is repaired with a sincere apology. Coy agreed and Mark was upset, saying he couldn't do that to his daughter. I told him to leave if that's the case. Mark left for a few hours and handed my daughter a check for $1,000. I explained that Coral can't come back if there's no punishment. My husband's ex-wife is saying that I'm banning her from our home because she didn't deserve that bigger space and that we were treating Coral unfairly. But I said she did that. There was nothing unfair about the situation. The ex just hung up. Now my husband's ex-in-laws are bombarding him with phone calls saying he's a horrible dad. His sister even said he's being a bad parent and they're best friends, so it's really getting to him. This happened last night and he hasn't gotten up yet. Should I apologize? Am I the astronaut? There are obvious big problems here. I don't know if this was a PC that she built. Sounds like it. It's yes, standing on business. There you go. There are huge problems here. And this is one of the dangers of a blended family is, especially if you blend those kids later. How long have they been together? Did we talk about that? Married 6 years ago. Okay, so they've been together they've been married for 6 years. And Coral, the one who did the damage, is 14. And Leah, OP's daughter, is 14 as well. So you've got one that chose to work to accomplish what they wanted to do, one that chose not to work and not accomplish anything, and then get pissed when someone else accomplished something and say that it wasn't fair, and then actually go destroy her shit. No, there has to be serious punishments here. There has to be. And the way that dad is handling this situation is obviously indicative of him being an enabler to her behavior and the reason that she is the way that she is. Obviously, mom and grandparents over on that side and his sister, obviously the version of the story that they're getting is slanted. Who's their source? Who's the source? It's Coral, the person who did the damage, the person that said this wasn't fair, the person who chose not to work and not achieve anything and then get pissed at someone who did. They had the same exact opportunities. One chose to open that door and one chose not to. That's it. No, OP, you are not the astronaut for telling your husband that your stepdaughter can't return home until she pays your daughter back. I think there might be a different way to go about it, because not allowing her back is one thing. If she's back, forcing her to work and work it off is another. Like, I understand how dad is like, well, you're just not letting her come back. Like that means that she can't see me. And now there's this imbalance in custody that might cause turbulence in my agreement with my ex. Like there are those things there, but I'm willing to bet here that if OP was approached with some kind of solution that was okay, here's the plan. She's gotten this job. She's going to work, and every week she's going to hand her check over until she has this whole thing paid. As long as she's working toward that solution, can she come stay back here so that you can still have that normal schedule? And then dad doesn't feel like he feels like he's being a piece of shit right now because he's not going to get to see her. That's the only real concern. It's not that there's punishment there. Yes, he was opposed to punishment, period. But he feels like a piece of shit because she's saying she can't come back. Yes, he's an enabler. Yes, he's part of the problem. Yes, this is going to cause bigger marital issues for you down the line. And you have to make a decision right now. Like, is this the deal breaker? Because there has to be some kind of common ground and understanding when it comes to disciplining your kids. You have to have the ability to discipline every kid in that family, especially when you're disciplining a kid in defense of another kid. And if the situation was flip-flopped, OP, would you act exactly the same? If your daughter had done this to Coral, would you respond exactly the same? I don't know. I don't know if she would have or not. She should. She should be able to say yes. And if she can't say yes, then she needs to look at the difference between how she did respond and how she would respond if it was flipped. And that will indicate to her what pieces of this are going too far. There has to be consequences. You're right. There has to be pain. Francis, yeah, there's got to be a reason that Coral is acting up as well, but I think we know what that is. We know what that is. She chose not to work to achieve what Leah achieved. They had the same exact opportunity. One took advantage of it and said, bet, all right, cool. I'm going to go work and save up what I need to save up and turn this into my palace. And one was like, nah, I don't want to work. So did nothing. And then couldn't stand to see someone else getting what they wanted, but they weren't willing to work for it. That, as a parent, to me, is super alarming. Because I'm like, whoa, hold up. You're 14. It's not too long before you're going to be out independent in the world, and you're going to have to be willing to work for things. And if you aren't willing to work for things, then accept that you don't have things. Like, that's one level. But to not be willing to work for things and then be pissed at people who did, that's not okay. That's not an okay worldview to enable, Dad. Tackle that first. Look at fixing that before your daughter's out there with a completely dysfunctional adult life. This from the Dusty Thunder subreddit is titled, Am I the astronaut for punching my sister at a family barbecue? Was it one of the activities? Did you have like a family boxing match? Which honestly is not a bad idea. Trigger warning, child loss. Damn. I, 32 female, have a sister, 26 female, and we have never gotten along. Even when we were kids, we would fight like cats and dogs on the best of days. My sister is a spoiled, entitled brat and always has been because my parents have always given her everything she's ever asked for. She has never had to work for anything, nor was she expected to follow the same rules as me when we were growing up. My mother almost died giving birth to her, and because of this, she has been their miracle child. I've been in therapy for years, working through the resentment I had for her, and I've come a long way. I have even tried to reach out to her through calls and texts to try and repair our relationship several times, but all of the attempts have been ignored. A couple of important things to know before I get into the story. My husband and I had our first child almost 3 years ago after 5 years of trying and 3 miscarriages. He is my parents' first grandchild. He is the light of our lives, and my parents adore him and spoil him rotten while still respecting our boundaries. Also important to know is that our son is nonverbal autistic. My sister and brother-in-law have never met my son. My sister and brother-in-law, 26 male, have no children. My brother-in-law is in the Navy, and they have been moved all over the country. During the pandemic, they were stationed in Hawaii and therefore unable to travel home for the full 4 years that they were stationed there. I have a great relationship with my brother-in-law, and I'm a lot closer to him than I am to my sister. My husband and I live in the same city as my parents, and most of our family lives a short drive away. Now on to the crazy. My sister and brother-in-law recently got new orders from the Navy that they were going to be stationed back on the mainland, though it was still across the country from where our family lives. They decided to come home to visit before they relocated since they haven't seen family in such a long time. My parents decided to throw a big family cookout so that all the family could come together to get to see them before they moved across the country again. I didn't really want to go, but I knew it was important to my parents, so I decided to go anyway. My husband had to work, so I took my son and went to the party. Our whole extended family was there, as well as my brother-in-law's immediate family. Everything was going great for the first hour we were there, but things started to go downhill when my sister came in drinking a Red Bull. She set it down on the coffee table in the living room without even thinking about it. My dad saw this and mentioned that she might want to move her drink because there were small children running around and it could get knocked over. She said she would, but never did. A little bit later, my son came running in, saw the shiny can on the table, and reached for it. He ended up dumping the whole can on the floor. My sister was pissed that her drink had been wasted. She looked at me and said that I should clean up after my kid, but I replied, "Dad told you it would get knocked over. You should have moved it." My dad made my sister clean up the mess, which pissed her off even more. After that, she kept quietly making derogatory comments about my son to other family members, thinking I couldn't hear them. I let the first few go, but after she called my son the R word to one of our cousins, I'd had enough. I confronted her and told her that if she had something to say about me or my son, she could man up and say it to my face. She did get in my face and began screaming and cussing at me, saying that she wasn't surprised that my child turned out special and that it was a good thing that my first 3 kids died because I would have screwed them up too. Okay, we're going straight to AskCon 1 right now. We're going to red flag this, and this is a DFHB Club rejection. Immediately. You are an evil piece of shit, sister. I completely lost my shit. I don't think she was expecting me to retaliate because I punched her right in the face and she went down hard. I'm not a violent person at all, but I do have my limits and I am fiercely protective of my son. My dad and 2 of my cousins stepped in and broke us up. My mom dragged my sister into another room and began screaming at her for saying such horrible things about my son. I went outside with my cousins to cool off, and while talking to them, my brother-in-law came out to apologize on behalf of my sister. I told him I appreciated it, but that I didn't want an apology from him, only one from my sister. He mentioned that he thought my sister might be jealous of my son because he is the only grandchild, and now there has been a shift in the dynamic between her and my parents. Because she's not the baby anymore. That made perfect sense to me. With them doting on my son constantly, there was no room for them to spoil her. I took my son home shortly after all of this occurred. About an hour after I got home, I started getting texts from 2 of my aunts as well as from my mom saying that I was an asshole for punching my sister and that I completely overreacted. My aunt insisted that I apologize to my sister for punching her. When I told her I would not be apologizing, she said I should be ashamed because I ruined the party for everyone. Now I'm starting to wonder if I did overreact by hitting her. I don't see why I should have to apologize when she was the one who said such horrible things to me in front of our whole family. Honestly, I don't care if I ever see my sister again, though I would miss my brother-in-law. I do feel bad for ruining my parents' party that they worked so hard on. Am I the astronaut for punching my sister and refusing to apologize? Hells no. Hell no. Now look. I'm not going to advocate violence, but this bitch deserved it. This was a mama bear thing, right? This was a mama bear thing. This was not her personal pride. This was her defending her child. And because this entitled evil person couldn't be bothered to move their drink, even though they had been warned it was going to spill and they said that they would do it, because they chose to be lazy, they feel like they're entitled to get to make terrible, evil comments about their sister's child. Her nephew. But I don't think she gets to use that term. I don't think she gets to say that she's connected to this child anyway, because clearly she does not want to be. Clearly she didn't earn this title of aunt. They're connected by blood and that's it. The shit that she said is unforgivable. It makes her, like we've already said, an AskCon 1 DFHB rejects, terrible, evil, malicious, shite human being. That was a true colors moment. And how the this family is now saying that you're terrible. You should apologize. You shouldn't have done that. What? Did they not hear what was said? Here's my guess. And we talk about this a lot. Whenever you start getting chirpings from other family members, number one, of course, who's their source? If they didn't hear this directly themselves, it was reported to them by sister, who, of course, has her own version of the story here, right? Of course, who's the source? Here's the second part. When you hear those chirpings from family members, think about motivation. Because if they're still around and the sister's still around, the amount of bullshit they're having to listen to, they're having to put up with the sister bitch about how this happened. They're having to listen to her cry and bitch about how it's so unfair. And even after sister left, I'm guessing she's still messaging all of these people talking about how she was wronged and blah, 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 blah. That's why they're saying that you need to apologize. They want their own pain to end. Just understand that the majority of times, whenever you hear from family members that you need to apologize or that you were in the wrong, think about what they're trying to gain. They're trying to gain peace in their lives. They just want this bullshit to go away. They don't want to have to deal with it. I don't know that that's the case, but it's very likely the case. There's nothing else that makes sense to me that could look at what sister said and for an onlooker to be like, yeah, you were wrong for, you were wrong. There's a mama bear moment. Because she was too lazy to move her own freaking damn drink. Oh yeah, the whole throwing her miscarriages in her face is a whole separate issue. Like, she deserved to get cold cocked in the face for what she said about the kid. What she said about the miscarriages is a whole new level. You got to be the amount of evil that has to be flowing through your veins to be capable of saying such a thing and to let it get out your mouth and to mean it. Wow. And for all these family members to be like, hey, yeah, you were the wrong one. You were wrong. You shouldn't have done that. Okay. If that's how you really feel, then you're not part of my life anymore. So deuces. All right, here we go. Next story. This one is from the AITAH subreddit, and it is titled, Am I the astronaut for embarrassing my fiancé by saying that just because we're getting married does not entitle him to my inheritance? Ooh, money shots fired. Info, if you had read this post before, don't worry. I posted it in AITA, and it was removed. I'm reposting it here. Well, my first time reading it. I, 32 female, recently got engaged to my partner, 35 female, just a year ago. As of right now, we have been together 5 years, and our wedding is planned for May of 2025. I'm just going to get straight into it. Unfortunately, a couple of weeks after our engagement, my Nana passed away. The reason for it, I will not disclose. My Nana and Grandpa worked extremely hard throughout their lives, were very successful, educated, and had really high-paying jobs. They were very restricted on spending money young and so lived elderly years with lots of it. Worth noting, my grandpa is a very intelligent man, and he's very smart with money and investments. So when I say lots, I do mean lots. My Nana wrote a hugely generous sum of money into her will that was to be inherited by me, my brother, and my 3 cousins. Even after the money was divided up, there was still thousands to each of our names. I also won't disclose the exact amount. When I heard the news, I told my fiancé and he was incredibly overjoyed, much more than I expected him to be. I went along with it and shrugged it off until later in the day when I heard him on the game with his mate saying, I can pay off my credit card with that money, mate. We can finally get that boys' holiday we've been planning, eh? And laughing. I walked into the room and asked, what money? And he immediately looked at me funny and said, from your Nan, babe. I immediately exploded on him and said, you won't be paying anything off without my permission, and there most certainly will be no boys' holiday. It's not your money to have. It's written to me from my Nana. It's not for you. We had a shouting match, and I left the room upset. He later got off the game and found me in the kitchen where he scolded me again and said, we're getting married. You will become my financial burden. Any money you take in is mine also. It was incredibly selfish of you to make such a fool out of me in front of my friends and giving them a false hope of a holiday. Okay. We're going to go ahead and red flag this. We're going to go ahead and brozo this as well. He gets the brozo aboard there. Again, worth noting, it wasn't me who said anything about a holiday, and where I became a financial burden, I don't know, considering I am at a very good job and I don't want children. I left the house without saying a word, and I'm typing this at my friend's house right now. I forgot to mention that this incident has literally just happened. The reason my fiance only just found out is because until now, I didn't even know if the money was coming to me or not due to several family and court complications. Am I the astronaut? Edit. This was originally posted yesterday. I spent the night at my friend's house. You are not the astronaut, madam. I mean, money obviously brings out the worst in people. Yeah, it can bring out the best in some people, but by and large, money brings out the worst in people. And he showed his ass right then. The fact that he doubled down on it is what really gets my goat, right? That's a saying, isn't it? Gets my goat. The fact that he doubled down on it, and here's what I'm guessing happened. Like he's all riding this high, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm rich. I mean, we're rich, but I'm rich. Hell yeah!" And then he gets on with his boys, and he's like, "Oh, bro, I'm so rich now. We can do all kinds of shit. We can pay this stuff off." And then she comes in, and he's like, "What? What's up?" Yeah, your money. Yeah, from your nan. What do you mean it's not mine? What do you mean I can't do anything? What? It's bullshit. Goes back to gaming. He's like, "Bro, did you guys hear that shit?" And the friends are then like, "Bro, you cannot let your woman treat you like that, bro. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to go tell her." So he spent the next amount of time while he was still gaming, getting pumped up by his buddies, and then he marched in there and made an ass out of himself. Scolded her for giving his boys a false sense of hope about a boys' trip. His dumbass friends talked him into doing this dumbass thing. He's a dumbass. We'll give him that. He would have done something to this effect anyway, but they like, I guarantee you, when they were finishing playing that game, they got the speech all written for him, right? They all collaborated while getting their asses whooped at Call of Duty. They're like, "Bro, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do." And then he went and did it. Dumbass. OP, you were NTA. Also, if you noticed, the controller has lightning on it. Because why not? Seriously, it's weird though. It's weird that he's a gold digger now. He didn't know anything about the money before, because I mean, maybe OP talked about it a little bit, but they've been together for how many years? 5 years. They've been together for 5 years before money ever became a thing here. So at some point it became about the money for him, which sucks, right? That sucks. But I mean, if you're a person in a relationship, married or not, you have to understand that family inheritance doesn't belong to you. You also have to understand that there could be a prenup involved and be okay with it. Are you with the person for the person, or are you with the person for the money? At some point, he was with the person for the person because the money wasn't there. But at some point, he's like, "Oh, well, yeah. I mean, if there's going to be money, I want the money too." And then it insulted his manhood whenever he found out that he had no claim to that money. And at that point, it may have been exaggerated and turbocharged by this feeling of being emasculated, right? It might have been like, "Oh, wait, so she's going to be rich and I'm not? I'm going to be relying on her for all these things. I'm going to have to ask permission to do anything with this money at all. So she's going to be wearing the pants." That could have fueled his feelings here and his compensation for feeling that way by marching in there and scolding her for it. He could be trying to reestablish his dominant position here. He could be trying to reestablish his masculinity. Well, I mean, you can reestablish it solo, buddy. Time to start playing solos instead of duos. You're going to find your ass single. This is from True Off My Chest, and it is titled, "My husband just told me that he would divorce me if his late wife came back during an argument. My husband and I have been together for 10 years, and we have been married for 6. He and his late wife were together for 3 years and married for 1. They have a son who is now 13. I know I don't come first in his eyes, and as a person who doesn't like a whole lot of attention, it worked out pretty well. He goes to her grave every day after work and takes their son to her grave on the weekend for an hour to spend time with his mom. I work from home as an online tutor working with kids on English and history, so through COVID, my stepson was home with me during school remotely. I've known him since he was 3, and we have a decent relationship. We've bonded over shared hobbies like building Gundam models and the Percy Jackson books. Yesterday was his birthday, and I gifted him a special edition box set of the second series in the Rordenverse, The Heroes of Olympus. When he opened my gift, he all but screamed and hugged me, and as he was thanking me, he called me Mom. I didn't say anything, but I did smile. I've raised him for almost 7 years, so sometimes I feel like his mother, even though I know our bond isn't biological. My husband became furious, and once my stepson went up to his room to read his new books, he began to yell at me. Quotes including, "You're not his mom. How could you ever be his mom? How dare you let him call you mom? And you don't have any children. He's mine and not your son." To defend myself, I only replied that I was glad my stepson saw me as a maternal figure. Also, we need this right now. My husband blew up and told me, "If my wife came back from the dead, I would divorce you in an instant for her. Don't act so high and mighty because you help my son with homework sometimes or build stupid plastic figures. No matter how many bedtime stories you read him, you are not and will never be his mother." Holy shit. It's been 10 years. It's been 10 years. This hurt me. My husband and I are sleeping in separate rooms and I feel awful. I don't know how to respond. I love my stepson. I love my husband, but right now I feel utterly devalued and replaceable. I just needed to get my feelings somewhere I know he won't find. Thank you for reading. Relevant comments from OP. After the argument, I went up to my stepson's room and apologized for the shouting. He told me his dad did the shouting, not me, and asked me if it was his fault. I told him his dad was insecure because we get along, and it was not and will never be his fault. I hope he knows that he isn't to blame in the slightest. I spent the rest of his birthday reassuring him that this isn't his fault. I just hope he doesn't internalize it. OP said that her husband went to his late wife's grave after the argument and stayed there for a few hours while I set up my stepson's birthday. Just a few boys from his school, cupcakes I made, and a movie marathon evening before everyone went home. He got home just as the party ended. Okay. Man, OP, I am so sorry that you have to deal with this. Your husband needs therapy. He needed it 10 years ago, but he has an unhealthy obsession and inability to move on here. And it's fine to still include those that are past in your life. That's 100% fine. But he's not healing. He's not healing. He's not moving forward at all. He is just as raw emotionally as he was 10 years ago, and he's trying to pass that on to his son. And maybe he has already at this point. He's living in the past. The things that he said to you are vile. Let's clarify this real quick. You are 100% not an astronaut in this scenario. You sound like a freaking saint, lady. You sound like a saint. Like, you don't get too involved. You stay back. You got him stuff that he actually likes. He said something. You can't control what he says because you let him say it. What were you supposed to do in that moment? Be like, "Don't call me mom." Oh, okay. He is harming his son with this inability to move forward. I'm sure it is very, very difficult for him. That's why he needs therapy. If there's a way to make him see that he is doing harm to his son, maybe that's enough pain to create the change of therapy, the change of starting the healing process 10 years after the fact. But the damage that it's doing to your relationship right now might be irreparable. I don't know how you right now, OP, sit here and still are able to say, "I love my husband." I don't know if you've seen, was it Toy Story 4? 3? 4? 3? 4? Don't know. Maybe 2. 4, I think. Forky, okay, whatever one Forky is in, where he's like obsessed with trash. It's like, "Oh, I'm trash. You're Forky right now." It's like you get treated like trash, and that somehow isn't a big deal to you. It's a big deal. Your loved one should never treat you like this, should never say these kind of things. And he went straight for the jugular just to make sure that you felt as small as possible. He unleashed what he knew would make you feel just minuscule. If she came back, I would divorce you in a heartbeat. Don't act all high and mighty. Okay. He chose divorce right then. And maybe the only thing keeping you in the house at this point is because you do care for your stepson. He won't let you care too much. He's kept you at a safe distance to this point. He will never let you have a real relationship with him. So that needs to be weighted in here at some point. You have enough separation to where if you end up getting divorced, the impact on him would be minimal because he has kept you at a distance. He, meaning dad, has kept you at a distance. So if that's the only thing holding you back, I mean, this poor kid, this poor kid's going to have a lot to deal with as an adult, no matter what, because of the damage his father has done to this point. He's going to need, they both need therapy, obviously, but he is going to need at some point as an adult to make that choice himself, assuming that his father doesn't start the healing process himself. His father isn't accepting reality at all. And that's very, very harmful to a kid who's lived this way since 3 years old. This is reality for him. This is normal for him. Holy shit. Yeah, Serena. Yeah, the fact that he was with his late wife less time than his current wife and still feels and says these things. So he's got obviously unresolved trauma, right? He's got unresolved trauma and he goes through these bouts where he has to project his discomfort onto her. Maybe his feelings of just not knowing how to process anything here. So he just diverts back to his basic shit self and just tries to inflict damage on other people. He can go through a healing process, but he's got to choose to do it for him and for his son. It may be an easier choice for him if he realizes that he's doing his son harm. And that's my point. Maybe. I don't know if you're going to be the one to tell him that. You could try, and trying to tell him that is probably going to end your marriage. But maybe, just maybe, it'll plant a seed and it will showcase the pain that's needed for change. Maybe. This is from True Off My Chest, and it is titled, I broke into my mother-in-law's house today. Valentine's Day has always been special to my wife and her family. So the other day when I asked my wife what she wanted for Valentine's Day, she burst out into tears. This was obviously not the response I wanted, and I asked her what was wrong. Her dad died last summer. Clearly, I already knew this, but she goes on to tell me how he would always get her mom roses, Hershey Kisses, and Hostess Ho-Hos, and she's crying because he can't do that this year, and her mom will be alone. I have to work today, but I took a detour to mother-in-law's with roses, Hershey Kisses, and Ho-Hos, knowing mother-in-law wasn't going to be home. I used the hidden key and got in, arranged everything, and then hightailed it to work. Mother-in-law won't be back home for another few hours, but I'm just giddy thinking about her reaction. I don't plan on telling either of them, so I just wanted to put this here. What a great example of what your partner in life should be, right? Update. So my mother-in-law instantly knew it was me. She thought it was either me or my wife. She texted my wife first, and they put 2 and 2 together. She texted me and said, Duke, her dog, told me that you stopped by. So I told her, I don't know what he said, he's a liar. And she thanked me for the gifts, even though I thoroughly denied the accusations that the dog made. I mean, I thought we were pals, but Duke is out here telling my secrets, LOL. My wife says she has a special gift for me when I come home from work tonight, and tomorrow I'm taking her to her favorite steak place. So my big secret was a secret for all of 1 hour. Man, yes, there is that element to it. There is that freaking element to it where you're like, what if you freak her out because she thinks that like her past husband now made this shit happen? Like putting some kind of explanation there to not freak her out. The fact that she knew who it was immediately is great. Like that, you avoided that altogether, which is great. But having a partner who sees that something is like deeply troubling you and then hears the explanation and is like, I might actually be able to do something about that, and not say anything, just do it. Just do it to do it. Not want the credit. Just do it to make people feel good, because making people feel good feels good. I think that's something I've grown to understand later in life more and more so. It is that doing good things for people is selfish of me, because it makes me feel good. Doing good things for Candy Thunder and the kids and anybody, doing good things that make people happy feels good to me. It's like that episode of Bluey when she cleans up a mess and her tail starts wagging. She's like, oh, I actually like helping and making people feel good. It is rewarding. And it takes just as much effort to do something the right way or the wrong way, or to do something kind or cruel. It takes less effort to do something kind than it does to do something cruel. It takes less effort to exude joy than it does hate, because the tax of hate is higher. You carry it with you longer. It has negative effects on your body and your mind and your soul. Being good, a positive force in this world, is the easy thing to do. And you can do it selfishly because it makes you feel good. Freaking love it.